Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Torment Tides of Numenera. That's right, if you've been following this game, it has come out today, February 28th. I've been waiting for this for a long time. I played the beta when it was released on Steam. I even went so far as to buy some of the Numenera RPG source material, including the Torment Explorer's Guide, just to get a little bit more background on this game. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail yet. I think I'd rather just flesh things out a little bit with what I've learned as we play. So let's go ahead and get started here. I've also graphically enhanced the game just a little bit using Reshade. Some of you will like that, some of you won't, I suspect. But if you could see the before and after, it helps quite a bit in just making the game, the art of the game, pop. It's not one of those games that requires a huge amount of FPS to play. Most of it is pre-rendered, and it looks quite good. I'm going to go with a male cast-off this time around.
Your mind wakes in darkness. Aching cold sets into an unfamiliar body. A distant howling surrounds you, louder with each passing second. Insistent and invisible hands slap and tear at the membrane that protects you.
Incidentally, I do have the connected chat going from JOI Caster at the moment, so if the audio is a little too faint, either the game's or my own, feel free to let me know and I'll do what I can to fix that. So we start off about as in medias res as it gets. We are falling from the sky. Let's see what else it has to show us.
Your first emotion is an involuntary and formless panic. You feel you have forgotten something important. As if it once meant the world to you, but the details slip away as you grasp at them. You force your eyes open.
Got our first choice. We're falling from the air. We can either look at ourselves or we can look around. I think we're going to get plenty of opportunity to look at ourselves later on, so we can find a mirror or a pool. But we may not get the opportunity to see the landscape from this vantage point ever again.
A white-pink fleshy cocoon surrounds you. Even as you look, a minor rent in its side tears open, and the howling wind forces its way inside.
We were inside the cocoon as we're falling.
The cocoon rips away, gone before you can grab it, spinning you into a dizzying tumble. You are falling, the world many kilometers beneath you. You catch a glimpse of a curved horizon, and also the ground beneath you that is approaching deceptively quickly. Above you, a small moon is slowly collapsing in upon itself. A corona of acid green and black energy playing around its edges. The wind buffets you and burns your eyes, but you don't need to see the details of the faraway ground to know you're in serious trouble. You won't survive a fall from this stratospheric height. A part of your frantic mind babbles that technically you probably fell from a thermospheric height. You struggle to stay focused as the ground rushes toward you.
How did it know that I'm going to play a nerd? Okay, so on the gradient of RPGs, if you imagine them being between a sort of simulationist style, like the old Infinity Engine games, I think of the first two Fallout games especially, or more sort of storytelling, narrative focused. I think of Mass Effect mostly on that, where, for example, completing side quests determines things like whether or not Morden catches a stray bullet at the end of Mass Effect 2. There's not really a causal relationship there, but there's been a lot that's put into delivering a kind of narrative experience based around a kind of theory. Between the two, this game definitely trends more towards the simulationist attitude. And an example of that here is that it is possible to kill yourself right at the beginning. If you dive towards the ground, if you basically say, I'm just going to see what happens, I'm going to test the system out and see if my choices really matter, yeah, you'll be met with a game over pretty soon. So we're not going to do that. We're actually going to try and flatten out to catch the wind.
Instinctively, you spread your arms and legs, and they respond sluggishly. You stop tumbling head over heels. Though you are still spinning laterally, that motion has calmed as well, and you have space to assess your situation, and perhaps to understand the predicament and the body in which you find yourself. Below you, you see a large landmass. A massive ocean dominates the rest of the visible globe, dotted here and there with island chains. Small moons, unusual structures, and strange machines rush past you in glittering profusion as you plummet toward the ground.
seemingly no matter how we fall, even if we manage to hit the ocean, we're going to die falling at terminal velocity. But we've at least, by spreading out, given ourselves a little time to observe where we are. I am actually going to... So, you're given many opportunities to try and remember the past. And at this point, I don't know exactly how all of that will sort of cohere together. I don't know whether or not, for example, it's going to form some sort of cohesive narrative that you will get a chance to sort of interact with later, or whether it's just sort of expository dialogue. But the opportunities to remember those sorts of things are rare. And they're usually, well, they're not rare, but individual things in which they reference. An opportunity may pass you by and you may never see that same opportunity again. So I'm actually going to take the chance to try and get some backstory.
It's hazy. You were in a tall passageway, its sides slicked with dew, the air warm and moist, as if you were caught in the breath of a giant organism. You remember fleeing in fear and exhilaration, laughing through the terror. What was it that pursued you?
I feel like we're going to find out pretty quick.
Something ancient and cold, its coiling power the promise of oblivion. Its shadowed tendrils struck at you, and the walls where they landed were torn apart utterly, destroyed beyond any hope of repair. You leapt into a membranous cocoon and fell from the station, the moon. And then you were empty. But who were you? What was that creature? A word surfaces in your thoughts, and you seize it before it vanishes. Sorrow. The world fills your sight. You're about to hit.
So we're not going to give up and dive. That's definitely going to lead to a game over once again. We can try and stop the fall, but as I recall, it doesn't do much. Once again, I think I'm going to take the opportunity to try and get as much information as I can. And one of the interesting things about your character, the last cast-off, is that you can very often get context for circumstances you've never been in, simply by trying to remember. That's the nature of how amnesia works in this game. So, let's see if we can remember anything about our enemy.
It hurts your mind to recall, but you push past it, a creature of the forgotten world seeking you out across the centuries. But it's not you it seeks, is it? It sought the man whose memories you shuffle through now, and you realize suddenly that you are not him. You were... Who? Who were you? If you somehow managed to sidestep everything you know about anatomy, physics, and death, and you are surprised to realize that you do know something about them, and you survive this fall, you suspect that you might be able to reawaken a dormant strength you sense inside you. But who could possibly survive a fall from this height? You remember reaching an escape tube, and you remember being struck by a tendril of force, and then the fall. The fall. You open your eyes in time to see a riot of color around you, your descent barely slowed, and then agony flares throughout your body as a crunching impact destroys you. The last thing you hear is a rapidly cycling whine of energy, and then...
So if it's not obvious yet, the writing in this game is really good. It's one of the things that first attracted me to it. I'll take the opportunity to highlight it when I can, but this phrase here, a riot of color, is one of the things that I remember most, I think, from the first part of the game. There's lots of little metaphors like that.
Darkness.
So we're inside a very abstract interior space. It'll become clear, I think, well, it'll become more clear, I should say, a little bit about where we are. One of the things that I liked about this, though, is that right off the bat they took a risk. They made the first part of the game philosophical and introspective. I don't know what it is about gaming. For some reason, a lot of the best RPGs seem to have a philosophical nature, a willingness to take risks, which is, I think, just a way of saying that they have something to say. So, we can see a little bit around ourselves. It's got this very geometric sort of hexagonal pattern. It's very simple. Um, and right away we can see this point of light dropping from the ceiling. So let's take a look and investigate. Jumbled thoughts cloud your head as you study the empty bowl before you. Drops of liquid fall from the ceiling, splattering on the ground next to the bowl. The light from every drop is reflected in the bowl's rounded hollow, as if it hungers for that light, and needs to be filled, yet the bowl remains dry. Another drop falls from the ceiling and splashes across the pylons, wasted. So could there be any more of a direct way to tell us what we need to do next? One of the things that may not be entirely clear just yet is that your choices in this place shape who you will become. So the only option here is to use our strength, and let's see if we can get a little bit more strength out of it by using it. So, the first part, I've turned the tutorials off, because that's what you have me for. One of the nice things about this is that you get to decide how much effort you want to spend. Spend more points out of one of your 3 pools, and you increase the likelihood of success on any particular task. Because you only really have one choice, of course, here and later in the game, if you fail the task, you will very often be given a chance to try again. But I really want to succeed on this task, so I'm going to go ahead and spend 2 points, which is the most we can spend. And you'll see that we succeeded. Success. You carefully take hold of the bowl, avoiding the teeth on the serrated rim. Incidentally, if you fail, you'll take damage. With a deep breath, you move it over a glowing pool of fallen light. There it goes. Let's see what happens when the light falls inside. Even the bowl itself is geometric in nature, I think, betraying the sort of simplicity of this place. Drop by drop, the bowl fills, ripples spreading over the blurred outline of your reflection. A pale blue luminescence stretches into the corners of the room. A clear radiance spills across the segmented floor, washing away the nearest shadows and pouring into your mind, melting the ragged edges of your fragmented thoughts. You are not whole, not yet, but you have begun to heal from the damage done in your long fall. A voice calls out from somewhere high above, beyond the reaches of the spreading light. Hello? Are you still alive down there? We're up here. Build a path up to us and be careful. So we can zoom by using the mouse wheel, but it's pretty obvious where we need to go next. There's nowhere else to go but towards the next glowing point of light. I'm going to point out something here which struck me when I first played the beta. I wasn't sure whether or not this would change in the final release, but one thing you might notice is that you don't have the ability to choose your character's appearance. You might look on this as a sort of default projection hand-waved away later, if they were to include some sort of character appearance customization, but they never do. And that kind of makes sense. In fact, it makes perfect sense, given the nature of your origin. But that is pretty unique as RPGs go. In fact, I can't remember the last RPG that I played in which you couldn't customize the appearance of your character. In this case, personally, I don't really mind. As soon as you touch the orb, a memory floods your mind. You stand in front of a rusted door. The air is humid and dank. You've had a moment's respite from this waterlogged hell, a bubble of stale air, your resting point. You've breathed water before, and you've lived decades beneath the waves, but this body is an air breather, and the constant pressure has been crushing you ever so subtly. Worse, your companion's mind seems to be wandering from the task at hand. He's a genius with machines, as you well know, but now he seems distracted. The device in his hands is covered in knobs, wires, and antennas. He believes it can get the two of you through the corroded door, but he's merely staring at it. Perhaps he's lost faith in his invention, but that is hardly your concern. The mission cannot be delayed. It must proceed. Going with the theory that our choices in this place shape who we will become, We have the option to deceive him, to try and pressure him into proceeding, to threaten him, or to cast a spell to do it yourself. I'm definitely going to be in Nano. I'll explain more of my reasons why for doing that. They're the spellcasters of this setting. That seems the best way to do it. Also, the first two options could easily backfire. We could put him into too much pressure, which would not make it easier to do his job. The only one of these that seems to be a good option, really, is number 3. You mumble a few words, drawing power from the air around you, until a solution appears in your mind. You snatch the device from his hands, rewire it, and shove it back at him. "Oh," he says, examining your work. "Sorry, I was trying to improve the thing." He waves the device at the door, and the stale air of your bubble freshens as the door swings open. A dark hallway lies beyond, a passage that links the water-bordered cells and the aquatic viewing areas. What you seek lies there. Moments later, you're underwater again, your hands closing around a strange yet familiar artifact. You need it to complete something. It hovers above a pedestal, rotating in the dark water. An electric current runs through your fingers as your hand crosses the vertical plane of the pedestal, and an iridescent field coalesces so fast that the wave of pressure dazes you for a moment. The rising pulse of a sonar alarm rips through the water. The guards won't be far behind. The Foley effect in the background is a nice touch. They obviously couldn't voice the entire game, unfortunately, but the sound effects help. So we can either run away and come back for it. They won't be able to protect it forever. We can disable the pulse, or we can use a device to stop them, one of the ciphers in your belt. Because this is a memory, don't expect we're going to have a limited number of ciphers, which are the consumables of the game. You can think of them like potions, healings, kits, etc., just sort of all rolled into one. I'm going to go for using the device. You run urgent fingers over the devices fastened to your waist, a fog rising in your mind. A few could be used against the guards, but will also turn your skin to synth steel, or the surrounding water to boiling wax. Hardly ideal. Finally, you find a small silver sphere. Setting the sphere in place, you kick desperately for the safety of a nearby alcove. The sphere whirls and unfolds into a spiraling vortex. The sphere at its center speaks a few polite words in an ancient language, then begins draining the surrounding water into itself with alarming speed. The approaching guards shout, then scream as they too are sucked into the whirlpool and ripped to pieces. You allow yourself a fleeting smile, but are all too aware that more alarms are going off in the distance. We were a ruthless bastard, weren't we? The memory begins to fade as if you were being drawn backward through a tunnel, and you hear more pylons rising from the pit. Something is wrong. The events within the orb have settled into that gap in your mind, but the edges of it are rough, as though the memory itself is not truly yours. There's something else, a gust of sour air pulling at you, like a predator inhaling the scent of its prey at the far end of a dark, whispering field. So, being a sort of fantasy game, it's a combination between high fantasy and science fiction, I suppose, but definitely with an emphasis on the fantasy. There are many ways that the text here could be interpreted. It's interesting to me. The edges of it are rough as though the memory itself is not truly yours. Is that because you are a cast-off and not the changing god we'll be hearing about sooner? Is that because our choices differ from the originals? Or is there another explanation? We can get into theories about that a little bit later, but for the time being I find these things interesting to think about. So we've completed the next part. The glow that we came up to illuminated our character model and then disappeared. And there now seems to be another version up here, attracting our attention, so we're going to move up. And now, this is sort of the first time in which things have not been sort of fully linear. We've still got the memories down below, or rather the drops of light going into the basin below. If memory serves, though, nothing new happens when you examine it, but we do have new things to examine up here. There is a mirror. This mirror looks strange, as though what you see in it is real, and you're the reflection. That'll come into play very soon. And then there are these 3 doors. It reminds me an awful lot of the art design of Planescape Torment. Incidentally, if you've never played it, it's worth checking out. I mean, this game is the spiritual successor, so you won't need to have played it. But having played it definitely improves the experience a lot. The way in which they make reference to Planescape Torment is really it's sort of model. It really is. There's a lot of different ways in which you can do it. You can do the blunt force trauma, sort of just repeating and recapitulating the events of the past. You can do sort of the cheaper versions where you just sort of recreate famous and popular events from the different game directly. They don't do that. They're a lot more controlled about it, and they do it in a way that I think is a lot more satisfying. In this case, I don't know if these doors are designed to be a direct reference to Sigil when you first wake up, but let's take a closer look. Zoom out a little bit. No sign or symbol tells you what might be behind this enormous door. A dull chill radiates from its bronze, segmented surface, and the thick metal wheel seems frozen into place. The light around this doorframe dims and flares like a roaring fire in a high wind. Countless scratches and wounds mar the surface of this door. Someone made a great effort to get inside, to no avail. See, I've not played... The beta didn't allow you to play through the entire game, only the first part, so I've not played through enough to know exactly what these doors are all about. They're very confusing, but they seem oddly specific. They don't reference... They're not general in a way that makes me think that they're just something that you're supposed to look at and forget about. And knowing the way that these games are, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't figure out what it is until perhaps the very end of the game. And then a second playthrough, you get to look at these and you go, aha! You know, these are these 3 doors that I have to choose from later on. For now, though, let's take a look at our next objective. You stand beside a woman on a verdant crag. Beneath the two of you is a broad plateau, towering above the overgrowth far below. Strange machines have been built into the cliffside, presumably for reconnaissance or defense. A metallic disc gleams from the center of the plateau. Your self-aware, humanoid machines drill into the base of the cliffs below. If you were looking for a sanctuary, and you were, desperately, this seems like the right place. I don't know about this, the woman says, her voice flat, neutral. Her face is turned away from you. What makes this place any more secure than the other ones we've found? We can either draw our attention to the hidden details that your more experienced eye can see, can charm her into it, or convince her with the wisdom of your superior intellect. Ordinarily, I would opt for number 1, but on the odd chance that a little bit more intelligence out of it, we're going to go with number 3. A slight chill enters the air as you describe the potential power of the metallic disc below and the sealed vault beneath it. She nods. So that's what your servitor machines are doing down there. You've already chosen this as the site, haven't you? She waits for your affirmation and says, "All right, I'm convinced." The two of you sketch your plans for the sanctuary, drawing schematics and architectural diagrams. Then you descend onto the plateau to examine the open ground. So, in my efforts to try and learn as much as I can about the lore of the game, one of the most difficult things is piecing together the events of the past. There are a few events that it returns to over and over again, but often they'll just be, what at least seems to me at the first point, self-contained narratives. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on here. Presumably the sanctuary is to hide from the sorrow, but I don't know. My suspicion is that your companion here is the first cast-off, a character that you'll hear more about later, and may even eventually get the chance to meet. So let's continue. The woman suggests having one of the servitors build a shelter for your time here. You try to draw one of the constructs away from its task, but it doesn't respond to your voice. When you lay a hand on its shoulder to reinforce your command, it whirls and strikes you across the face with inhuman speed. It turns back to its task, ignoring you. Your companion helps you rise, laughter in her eyes. It seems your construct has other ideas. What's the matter with it? It's of course possible that we are using this woman, whoever she is. The Changing God has a bit of a history of that. Um, I don't know. Again, my feeling was that this takes place a rather long time ago. Um, if it is the first cast off, it would have to be a long time ago. Even though I think she's still alive. I think. Um, Another thing is that he tends not to get along very well with others, perhaps because his perspective at having lived so long is too alien, perhaps because of his sort of immortality. Um, he tends not to want to get close to people. But this sort of semi-camaraderie that he has with his companion is not something that you see very often out of the Changing God unless it's goal-directed. So, we can either use a Numenera to overwhelm the behavior, examine it for mechanical faults, or look for a deeper solution. We'll have the option to look for a deeper solution often, and a lot of the times the result will frustrate us, but it almost never punishes us. And in this case, this doesn't seem... number 3 does in fact appear to work. A mist falls onto the plateau as you wrap a fiber-shielding mesh around the construct's skull. The mesh powers up, protecting the construct's mind from any trans-dimensional emissions that might be in the area. Taking a deep breath, you repeat your command. Acknowledged. It obediently trundles to the site of your new shelter. The image freezes, then fades, and you feel the memory filling the gap in your mind, block by jagged block. You stagger, clutching your head. Reclaiming your memories hurts. And once more, there's something else. Hairs lift, one by one, on the back of your neck. Something beyond this room can sense what you're doing, and is hunting you. It's nice, I suppose, to have a little bit of time pressure. Also, once again, the sort of geometry of this place resembles what's going on as you reclaim parts of your memory. The landscape itself shifts to accommodate the changes. A vision of a city springs up around you, your city in flames and under attack. Her defenders have fought and died all day, and still the attackers keep coming. They fight as if your destruction were demanded of them. They care nothing for mercy, surrender, or plunder. What they want is blood. You have brought a keen-eyed companion to the top of the tower. She has seen the way to stop the invaders. You need to get her to safety, and you need to rally your defenders. So, these are not just random memories, I don't think. These are memories that are core to your personality. They're the reason why these memories have been selected here and why, upon remembering them, the events and the landscape that you see shifts and changes with you. One moment. It looks like Flux has come on, so I need to turn that off. Let's turn on movie mode, I think. That should fix it. Okay. So, I don't need to feel the need to fill in all the details of this. We'll be hearing a little bit more about it, though I wonder if the woman here, the keen-eyed companion that we found, is the memory of a woman we're going to encounter later who, without spoiling much, her personality starts to take over some of the other women around the city. I wonder if that's her. Let's see. But even as you turn towards the door of the tower, two of the attackers descend from a hovering machine. You don't have time to strike at them before they land. One is brutishly large, his weapon a vibrating axe. The other is slim, sheathed in glassy armor, and holding a hilt, with a sizzling, invisible blade. Your companion backs away. She's too young to help. Your enemies advance single file, confined by the parapet. So, we can either trade blows, we can duck under the swing, or we can fight defensively and figure out who presents the greater threat. Here, the choices mirror your three key statistics: might, speed, and intelligence. So, since I'm going to be playing a nano, and since also, even after some balancing changes, intelligence is by far the most important statistic. It's the one that's most commonly used between combats, and in the case of a nano, in combat. I'm going to go ahead and fight defensively. Incidentally, the first option it's the kind of thing where I happen to know here it's not going to kill you instantly, but it's the kind of dialogue option that strikes me as the sort of one that might result in killing you instantly. And choosing the wrong conversation option can kill you right away, in spite of what your statistics are in this game. The memory seems crystal clear. The giant is menacing, it's true, but the invisible blade of his companion is more worrisome still. The energy field that flickers and wavers around it suggests that she can carve matter at the molecular level, tearing pieces of her target into nothingness. If you're to save yourself, your best bet is to tackle her first. She's stuck behind the giant, waiting for her turn to attack you, unable to bring her weapon to bear until he's out of the way. But it's clear that she expects him to handle you, and her eyes rove behind you, her focus on your ward. She's certainly not expecting you to dive between the giant's legs and come up inside her guard. She can't bring her blade to bear in time, and you drive your dagger up onto her chin. You catch her before her deadly blade drops onto you and spin her around. The weapon slashes into the giant, and he topples, bisected. The immediate threat ended, you focus on finding a way back to your allies. You open the tower door and rush down the stairs. The door at the base of the stairs is slightly cracked, opening just a bit into the hall, and you hear more of the enemy soldiers beyond. So we can either hurl ourselves against the door and knock them to the ground, we can crack open the door to sneak past them, or we can charge through them, counting on your defenses to protect you. The third option doesn't strike me as, if our defenses are good enough to protect us, they'll protect us in the other two circumstances as well. And I don't think it's wise to, we might be able to catch them by surprise with number one, but I'm going to go for sneaking past them. See if that works. You press yourself against the gleaming door, easing it open, and your breath catches in your throat as it squeaks quietly, the sound like a bell in your memory. You pause, but the soldiers in the hall continue to talk. You push again, squeeze yourself through the narrow opening, and creep down the blood-stained hall. The memory begins to fade, and you find yourself back in your own body. Your temples throb with the racing force of your heartbeat, and the reclaimed memories blaze within you, like a bonfire on a mountain peak, visible to every predator for kilometers around. A tremor rocks the floor beneath you, as though a massive fist has struck the room itself. Swaying on your feet, you see frantic movement within the borders of a mirror at the edge of the room. This is a little trippy. At least it kind of trips me out. If we take a look at this mirror here, the border of this mirror is lavishly decorated with a dizzying number of interlocked symbols. Daggers, masks, paintbrushes, and amulets, and more. But that's nothing compared to what you see in the glass. You see a vast crowd of people, exact doppelgangers of you, shoving, arguing with, and fighting each other. Most are drab imitations of you, but a precious few are vivid and pull at your attention. Each of them bears an intricate pentagonal tattoo on their head. In their eyes, their actions, you see the memories you discovered within the orbs, and the choices you made, shining like distant stars. Your hand twitches at your side, and though some of the bright doppelgangers ignore you, an even smaller number immediately turn to you, waiting for you to choose them and learn what you might become. A rumble shakes the room, and a slow vibration spreads from the darkness below, rippling towards the ceiling. So whatever it is that's hunting us is getting closer. We're taking a look at the mirror, it's the only place to go forward. And the objects in the mirror, some of them seem to recognize us. So, there's the doppelganger with the clever eyes, there's an intelligent doppelganger with a furrowed brow, and the doppelganger with the mystical symbol on its brow. I believe, what the doppelgangers turn out to be... Well, the doppelganger always seems to show up when I play through the intro. But the clever eyes and the mystical symbol both all seem to have sort of nano-like bent, so I wonder to what extent these three options are transformed by our previous ones. It's also entirely conceivable that this is where you pick your class. I think that that's the case. However, that would mean that Clever Eyes would be the sort of the jack. The intelligent doppelganger with the furrowed brow could be a nano. The mystical symbol on its brow, they all have mystical symbols on their brow. It's the sign of a cast-off. So I'm going to go with the intelligent doppelganger. Incidentally, this choice reminds me an awful lot of one of the later stages of Planescape Torment, in which you met 3 previous incarnations. The doppelganger holds itself erect among the pressing crowd. It meets your eyes with a confident gaze, triggering familiar memories in the back of your mind. When you return from your contemplation, the doppelganger is waiting for your decision with a knowing smile. You don't have too much information to base these decisions on, so it's good that later on they do let you change some of these decisions. But we're going to pick this one. That is who I am. The remaining doppelgangers scatter for the edges of the mirror and vanish. Your chosen identity steps forward. Its appearance changes as it steps out of the rippling glass. Its face exudes intelligence and confidence. Shadows of several devices shimmer all around it, technology of several kinds, from a myriad of past ages. You get the feeling you, would be comfortable with all of it. The word nano sounds in your mind. Ah, yes. So, it seems that which one of the 3 we picked would indeed choose our character class. And it looks like our descriptor. A descriptor is, it exists inside of the Numenera tabletop RPG. If you've ever played the Fate RPG system before, it's another version of it. It's a way of sort of personalizing your character by giving him something that is quick and succinct and will help you roleplay later. So let's go ahead and continue. Your doppelganger continues walking, stepping into you, filling you, making you whole. Your decision rings out in the cavernous room, awakening and unlocking vast mechanisms behind the walls. Suddenly, a grotesque noise rings through your shared worlds, like a bell if bells could rot. Something is coming. We only spent 2 might, so when we restored everything from doing this, we only got 2 might back. The mirror fades, leaving a dark, open doorway. You take a deep breath and step through. So, we find ourselves at character creation here. Now, I definitely like the concept of your choices shaping not only the world around you, but also yourself. However, a lot of the choices are pretty opaque. The last one that we encountered there, where it helps you pick your class and or your descriptor, is a good example. We had one doppelganger that just had a pentagonal tattoo, whereas the previous description said that they all had a pentagonal tattoo. I assume from previous experience that that would have given you the option of picking a glaive or some other descriptor. But it's good here that they didn't go full Infinity Engine, no remorse. They will actually let you change your choices somewhat. And here, we just have the default package for a nano. We can change the character type, but it's chosen nano by default, and that is what I'm going to go with. I won't go into too much detail since we'll have plenty of opportunity to talk about the character choices later, and I've already largely chosen what it is I'm going to go with. We have a very large starting intellect pool, as befitting a nano. I think you get +4, depending on your class choice, and whatever the stat is associated with it. We get a concentration increase, and a concentration increase is not strictly speaking of skill in the sense that it's used for skill checks. It lets you use more artifacts, which is a special slot for very powerful equipment, so that's good. We get a cipher limit. As I said before, ciphers are the consumables in the game. They're also a huge part of the plot and the setting. And then we get onslaught, which is basically magic missile. It's basically your default attack as a nano, and we're going to be using it quite a bit. It looks like we get +2 intellect pool, +2 points to distribute to any pool, +5 health at each tier, which is interesting. I think everybody gets that, or at the very least, it's interesting that nanos get that, so I wouldn't be surprised if health bonuses are something that everybody gets when they tier up, and I wouldn't be surprised if other builds get more. The only thing that I know of right now that affects it directly is your endurance skill. And we gain 2 abilities at each tier. we can pick one lore skill. So let's go ahead and finalize the rest of our choices. We start out with 3 skills by default, again by virtue of our chosen class. Medium weapons and heavy weapons. We have 2 levels, 2 of inability. Oftentimes you can attempt any skill, and even skills that you quote-unquote have an inability with, you can sometimes use at the expense of a lot of points to have anywhere resembling a decent chance. We're going to rely on our bolt pretty heavily. It doesn't ever run out of uses, and once we start getting an edge in intellect, we can start using it for free. So I'm not too heavily concerned with dealing with our weapon skills here. I'm fine just using light weapons for the duration of the game, that's okay. And then here we start out with a point in Amnesis, take your pick. It's perhaps the most important skill of the game. Because you play a cast-off and a former body of the Changing God who's sort of been everywhere and seen everything, you are constantly given the opportunity to remember things from the past. All the time, and then succeeding on that skill check will often just allow the solution to just pop right into your head. So it's a very, very useful skill, and I'm glad we started a point with it. As far as dividing up our remaining points, since the beta, might and speed have been rebalanced. It used to be the case that you basically never used might. That's also kind of a problem in the tabletop RPG as well. But the game here benefits from the ability to be patched. What a concept. So that might is a lot more commonly used for melee weapons for your attack rolls. Other than that, though, it's not commonly used between fights. And the way that I'm going to play this character is I'm going to push as much as I can onto his out-of-combat abilities, social skills, omnisis, lore skills, and things like that, because the game really does allow you to, through intelligence and experience, avoid combat, and very often gain the rewards of the combat that you would have had, very often gain more rewards, oddly enough, than you would have had from fighting directly. It also doesn't do quite a number on your stats, so you don't usually end up expending quite as much. It's not always the case. But for that reason, intellect, even for more comment-oriented characters, has been, in my experience, far and away the most commonly used statistic. So, the temptation here is for me to put everything into intellect. I'm going to do that for now. Later on, I might not choose to put everything into intellect once I start getting an edge, but right now I have an edge of 0, which means that every time I use intellect, even spending a single point of boost is going to cost me out of that pool. So right now it behooves me to have as high of a pool as possible. We get 2 abilities to select. I'll just briefly touch on the choices. Scan Thoughts is a purely roleplay sort of ability. It gives you additional details in conversation. It comes up a lot. You get seemingly in like every 3rd conversation, you'll get at least one hint from Scan Thoughts. And it will give you details about the motivation of the characters that you encounter that you just simply wouldn't be able to infer any other way. So I'm definitely going to pick that. To my knowledge, there's no other way to get this. You have to play a Nano. This ability is probably the reason why I chose Nano. That and the fact that it has bonuses to the skills that I think are most important for getting the most out of the setting and the lore. But you also get access to Scan Thoughts. You have to pick it up as an ability. To my knowledge, at least in the first part of the game, you don't ever get it from an item or a cipher or anything else. You just have to know all the stuff that I'm telling you and pick it here. The other options are Innervate, which is a cure and a heal. Quantum Step, which would be a lot more useful if it lets you teleport yourself. Unfortunately, it's something you use on allies mostly. Resourceful gives you a training level in cipher use, which is good. I mean, as skills go, you will be getting new ciphers all the time, and this will allow you to pick the best ones, so the usefulness of the skill goes up the more and more ciphers you get your hands on, so that's a pretty good choice. And then there's also Adaptation, which, let's see, it looks like it affects all of your allies for 3 rounds, and it gives you some armor. It's pretty good. But usually you can get more out of your action economy than this. Also, the range is rather short. So I'm going to go for Innervate. We get some cipher use from our class, and we'll have an opportunity to actually get the cipher skill later on. Heal is pretty useful. So those will be our 2 abilities. And for exploration skill, I'm going to want to get all of these as high as I possibly can, because once again, they flock access to the lore of the game and learning more about the setting and what is around you. Even though we're going to have a companion that's going to have a lot of boosts in the particular skills, one of the things you want to know when you're building your character is that it's very often the case that you will not be able to allow your characters to sort of sub in for you. It's unfortunate. Um, but very often, even when your characters are present, it will be your skill that matters, your companions. In this case, whichever one you pick, I mean, in my experience, at least in the first part of the game, Mystical has been the one that I think has crept in the most. Natural, probably the least. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it into Mystical with an eye towards getting the others up as soon as possible. We don't get a weapon skill because we're not a glaive. And then you get a chance to choose your character's descriptor, which really just modifies your stats and your skills. For the most part, it just modifies your skills. One thing that's interesting, so I think with Learned, early on in the beta, this was amazing. You got something like 5 different skills, but you like lost the ability to defend with speed. So I wish it was still the case, because that's exactly the sort of thing that I would have gone for. The ability to unlock so much of what the game has to offer. But right now, it dips down your persuasion and your deception, and that is going to close off really as much of the game's content as not having access to the lore skills are. So it's not a great choice for me anymore. You may decide if you want to play sort of typical Nano, the Learned Nano, to try and offload as much of the persuasion and deception as you can onto your companions. Very early in the game, you'll encounter a companion who's quite good at those two things, but as I said before, he's not always going to be able to sub in for you. So I am going to go, I've had the opportunity to look at all these outside of the recording, and I'm actually going to go with Observant. The reason being that perception is a pretty good skill to have. It'll sometimes save your bacon. It will very often give you also role-playing details, like you'll notice somebody's hand moving towards their pocket, and it won't necessarily affect the combat in any real way, but it may give you additional dialogue options as well. Perception can do both those things. And it will give me 2 inability in running, which is not good. It will mean that my character won't be able to move very far in combat, but the conscious choice that I've made with this character is that, again, I'm going to sort of devalue a lot of combat skills in favor for a lot of the role-playing and lore skills. That's just unfortunately one of the trade-offs the game tends to make. Other strong options besides Learned, which is decent, not great. Clever is good. It gives you more willpower, it gives you deception, and it gives you more intellect. That's good to have on a Nano, especially if you want to be better at combat. The drop down in the skills is mitigated somewhat by the increase in the intellect pool, which gives you more points to spend on anything you want. So if in the span of a single rest you get 1 mystical skill check and 1 machinery skill check, this kind of ends up being a wash. So it's a decent choice. Charming is okay. For the opposite reason, if you want to emphasize skills and access but give up intellect, I actually strongly considered this, because it doesn't drop any of your other skills, but it does make you considerably worse at combat in exchange. So I think that Observant isn't quite as punishing. Concentration is also decent. Concentration gives you, like I said before, access to another artifact. And so having this is you can basically say, gain the benefits of a really powerful item in here. There's nothing to sneeze at. And one last thing I want to highlight, Wrathful. I think I played let's get Nano, I played a Glaive, I think, as my second character during the beta, and I went with Wrathful. This is actually a surprisingly decent choice. You'll notice that before, with any other skill, we have 2 inability and heavy weapons. If we pick Wrathful, that goes from 2 to 0, even though we've only got 1 training level. This basically gives you the ability to wield heavy weapons, period. Ordinarily, never be able to have the ability to do it in exchange for a dip in concentration style. Smashing seems to be the least useful of the sort of entry-based skills. You literally just bash your way through a crate or a door or something. There's almost always a way to sort of sneak and intellect your way through the set. But it's still good to have. We're going to go with Observant for this one. Yep. So we are speaking now to a figure called the Spectre. I have no idea where we are. Everything about the spectral figure seems dreamlike. He is a hazy silhouette who seems to be made of blue glass smoke. He wears stylish, well-cut clothes. His handsome, bearded face seems hauntingly familiar, though you've never seen him before. He breathes a sigh of relief when he sees you. We weren't sure that would work. We pooled our strength and channeled it through me to reach you, to wake you up. He glances at the other figures here and frowns unhappily. It took more out of them than we thought. The other reflections, they're more like shadows now. Look, I'll bet you've got a lot of questions. This whole place is basically your mind. Your body's still out there in the real world, healing from that fall. You need to get out there and finish the process. It shouldn't be too hard. To proceed, we actually have to ask a lot of these questions, so I apologize if some of you want to get straight to the action. It's coming soon, I promise. But for now, let's find a little bit more out about where we are. I think first on the docket is this thing that's hunting us. Before I met you, it felt like something was hunting me. Do you know what it was? He closes his eyes. That's a memory I don't want to recall. Large, black, furious. It's our death. It's the sorrow. He closes his eyes. I hope it's lost interest in you. If it finds us, we're done for. You said I had to finish the process. What do you mean by that? After you wake from this dream state and attune to the tides, you'll need to find something called a resonance chamber. Your body should have landed somewhere near it. Just climb inside that, and everything will be fine. If only it were that easy. I think we'll have the opportunity to talk a little bit more about the sorrow later. For now, let's ask him about the tides. The game is, after all, called Tides of Numenera. Tides are like a force, like gravity or magnetism or something, except they respond to people's actions and perceptions. Your body, that is, your body in the real world, needs the tides to survive. It's not something you need to worry about. Your body will attune as it wakes up. One of the interesting things here, so a lot of games have Paragon, Renegade, Light Side, Dark Side. This game has a somewhat similar mechanic. At least it's analogous to those, but there are 6 different tides. They all align to different dimensions of character, chiefly. They're about character, and they're about your choices as a character. We'll get the opportunity to learn more about each of them individually, and also one of the interesting things about the tides is, as your decisions tune you to various tides, we'll be able to use that as a means of force. So you will be able to sometimes get the opportunity to use the tides to overwhelm a person's mind and force them to do what you want. However, in virtually all the cases I have encountered, using the tides costs you. So it's usually best to try and find a different solution you can. We're trying to find this thing called a resonance chamber, but right now I'm more curious about these people here who have sort of dimmed and faded as a result of pulling me out of the chamber that I was in. So you call them reflections? That's what they are. As I said, it's your mind. You'll find reflections of people you knew, people you met in the real world, with whom you shared some kind of psychic connection. I don't know how or why, it just happens. It's another thing that it seems to happen a lot in RPGs. I think probably the strongest example of it was in Knights of the Old Republic 2, where the fact that you were a wound in the forest literally drew people to you and to your way of thinking, like gravity. Here, I suppose it could be related to your mastery of the tides, or simply towards your the changing god, it being a sort of manipulative little shit, using everything that he can to sort of bind people to himself. I don't think so, though. I think that this is something that just you simply have as an ability of being a cast-off and being able to use the tides. So, if this place is my mind, why don't I remember any of this, any of you? It's your mind. A construct built to, I don't know, share thoughts? Store your true self? Wait, you know how people say, in the first place? This is definitely the first place of your memory. Well, it's the first place for me, anyway. You probably know better since it's yours. If you don't remember now, maybe it'll come to you later. A couple of interesting things about this place. First of all, when you die, this is where you return, you sort of retreat into yourself, and then walk back out into the world somehow. Another thing is that as the plot of the game develops, this internal sort of memory palace also develops. It's quite cool. The nature of the psychic connection, incidentally, as well, and binding other people to yourself, is also another sort of half reference, almost reference to Planescape Torment. Your character also had a way of sort of attracting people to himself back then, but once again, it's also has a reason to exist in this game, completely independent of the first one, and that I find is really the way that they tend to do references in this game, and it's one of the best ways of doing it in general because it doesn't require you to play the first game to appreciate it. I would like to know more of the resonance chamber, since the Spectre told us it was critical to our survival. I remember pieces about it, but not the whole. It's a crystal sarcophagus. I remember it having 5 mechanical arms around it, and a metal ring set into the floor. I think we were aiming for it when we fell. When you open your eyes in the real world, it should be nearby. So there's a lot going on in this introduction. As you recall, we started falling from the world, and all of the details, I suspect, matter from that event. Apparently, the location that we were falling from, as we were trying to escape from something, presumably the Sorrow, was strategic. We were aiming for the resonance chamber, perhaps as another effort to escape, and that we were encased, I remember, in a sort of fabric like a cocoon. I wonder if that has anything to do with the resonance chamber itself, or perhaps if something went wrong with the transfer. One of the things that I'll put forward as a sort of crackpot theory right now, that you'll have the opportunity to investigate later, is perhaps you're not a cast-off. We'll talk a little bit about that more later. For right now, though, the obvious question is, who the heck is it that we're talking to? I'm you. I'm part of your mind, a splinter. I was waiting here for you. We called you with the memories of the others who are here. I don't know what happened next. How do you know all this, all that you're telling me? He throws up his hands in frustration. I'm just a part of you. I look at you, and I know. This place was made for you, for us. And I remember pieces of knowledge that come to me when you ask your questions. But that's all. So, the operating question, the question that will move things forward, how do I get back to the real world? There's a portal down here. It will take you back to your body. Just step through it, and the whole tides thing should take care of itself. He crosses his arms. When you wake up, find the resonance chamber and activate it. And then we can... What in the hells is that? I knew it was going to be that simple. It's the Zorro. It looks like it shattered on the portal that we came through. The Zorro is anchored to those reflections. It's devouring their power. Sorry, it looks like Flux has come up once again. I thought I turned to movie mode. Okay. We have to go to them. Destroy the anchors, or else the Zorro will erase us forever. So this is a forced crisis. One of the first things that you should note about this game is that combat is not just called combat actions, it is called a crisis. It fits the somewhat unique nature of this game that combat is not necessarily an inevitability. It's something that you can avoid, and indeed probably should avoid. Because once again, this game is definitely on the gradient of realism and simulation more than just sort of fantasy and story being sort of slave of the events that take place. So you very often will encounter combat that is quite difficult. This is forced, however. It is the Sorrow, and if the sound and the appearance of what it's doing here, impaling three of our memories, wasn't scary enough, let's keep in mind that this is our memory house, this isn't our eternal place. Somehow the thing that's hunting us has invaded and found us here. Scary. Basics of combat, you have a move action and attack action, like many other RPGs. So, you'll notice there's a glowing item on the ground here. I don't know if we can interact yet, but I'm going to move towards it with my move action. And then, I'm going to use, and it may not be clear, like a lot of people who start here may first try and hit things with their hands. But we do actually have access to our abilities, and I am going to use that here. One of the nice things about this ability is that you can choose the energy type. I don't happen to know which one of these is weakest to, though. If you do, though, it rewards you for having this sort of knowledge. I'm going to go with, I mean, these are constructs, so why don't we try Mental? Ooh, it's out of range. No good. I'll try this one, though, since it's further away. And I want to kill these things fast. In the first version of this combat, the speed at which you killed didn't matter. I have a feeling it does in this one. It causes more and more versions of the Sorrow to escape elsewhere into your memory. Alright, so that's one dead, and that's our first action. They're escaping, going inside our mind. And yeah, the longer the combat lasts, I have a feeling the more of them will release. If that's not the case, they did a great job of making you feel pressure, making you feel like you really need to hurry through this even if you don't. So, it looks like I can't pick up this item yet. I'm too clever for my own good. I have to figure out what it's useful for first. So, we're going to go up and try and hit this guy, and see what happens. And that makes so much sense. So we miss. It's because we missed, we didn't learn what the little shard blast is for. Well, I guess we'll have to deal a little bit more with more stars later on. So, let's try and spend a little bit more. 85%, this should be actually worthwhile. Wasn't expecting that. So, we once again still have not learned about the dagger. But, I'm going to move closer here. And this will hopefully get me in range using my bolt on this character this turn. Looks like it's transforming. Okay. So if you don't get to them quickly enough, my guess is that they transform. And then you have to kill additional things. So far in this combat, nothing has ever really had the opportunity to take back. But if we delay another turn, it will. I want to see what happens. I'm going to head over and pick up the loot. And this is our first cipher. It's a really good one. It deals physical damage, and it basically refills us back to full. In all of our statistics, it's essentially a free rest. I'm going to keep it, and I want to see if this... I always in the past have used it because you're instructed to use it during the tutorial. I want to see if I can actually take this with me into the real world. We'll see. This probably should turn into a thing, I guess. We can fight? No? Okay. So our little indicator here will show us the maximum distance we can move without having to do a double move, which would end our turn. We can get this far. And no, picking it up was our first action, so I see. So this is our actual turn. And it hasn't come to life yet. I'm gonna move up into melee just because I can. If my bolt misses, I want to be in range to hit it the next turn. And just choose mental again. Do I want to spend more intellect? Nah. It's an easy combat, and I have a feeling if we just miss, it will turn to a mobile L that will hit us, and we'll have the opportunity to attack. So we've already reduced combat to 1. I don't see the need to burn through all points. Not a lot of danger here. And we do. That's alright. Though it's going to release more squiddies into our poor brain that presumably we're going to fight there. 50% chance to hit with our bolt, so you'd think attacking with our fists would be better. Ordinarily, I would thought they had resistance to it. I think they do. He has a good buff on himself. I think it's called Fire. Game. So I think our hit is going to miss if we try it, so we're going to try the bolt again. There we go. We didn't have to. That's good. So it took a turn longer than it needed to, but in exchange, we didn't have to spend additional intellect to fight. That seemed like a pretty decent trade-off. We're already at 4 out of 9. You can see how quickly we go through this, especially without any edge. We pried it loose. The thing's a cancer infection. It's unstoppable, but you stopped it. He holds his head in his hands. I can't believe it found us. And here, he looks at you, terror in his eyes. That thing, the sorrow, it's been hunting you. It's what killed you in the first place. It'll keep hunting you until you activate the resonance chamber. I didn't remember until I saw it, but that's why the chamber is so important. You have to get back and activate the chamber before it's too late. The portal to your body is shimmering down there. Is that shimmering dome there? Go, now! So I think we exhausted all of the dialogue options in this anyways, so let's go ahead and continue. Gotta love hit graphical design in this place. You know, pre-rendered backgrounds are something acquired tidbits. I used to see them a lot more. I love them. The original Planescape Torment had them. A lot of great classic games had them. And they're a great way of ensuring that your FPS is always high, and the graphics tend to look really good, and it kind of works anyway, since a lot of the time backgrounds in games even today are fairly non-interactive to begin with. Go ahead and proceed.
Where did he fall from? His body smashed to talk. It's a wonder he's still breathing.
All I saw was a corona, not his origin point. But look, he's healing already. Spontaneous regeneration.
So, those of you who have played the game before might notice a slight difference in the coloration. It looks a little bit better here. That's because of, I'm using reshade, which is what Sweet Effects has sort of evolved into. If you've used custom shaders for Skyrim or other games in the past, you know what I'm talking about. But reshade is pretty cool. I recommend you check it out. It does require you to sort of customize it for every new game, although you can, of course, copy your settings from game to game if you want, and it downloads something like 40 preset settings. I find it works really well for this game. It makes the colors pop quite a bit. Also, Algard here said that our body was smashed to talk before. It appears that they have kept the tradition of having a sort of slang in the game. That's something I always like about Planescape Torment, even though in Planescape Torment the slang itself is for the most part inherited from the Planescape Torment RPG slang itself. I always like the fact that they preserved it, though. It adds a little bit of depth and input to the setting. Here we have words like Tolk and Carter, and I suppose we have the opportunity to figure out what they mean a little bit later, especially if we make friends with some of the colorful characters in the world. This character on the left, his name is Algard, and he says, "What was that? What did you do, Calistage?" His tone has become accusatory and suspicious. You open your eyes. The first thing you notice is this man's kaleidoscope of tattoos, writhing across his forearms. He wears a long dark coat, belted at the waist, supplies filling pockets. His boots are worn and stained with years of travel. You blame me? He emitted an internal physiological reaction in response to the fall, probably related to that fantastic healing process. Obviously, Algard. Her voice rolls and hisses, and you have to rub your eyes to be sure you're not seeing double. Faint echoes of her actions fail from her, each nearly mimicking her, though some act and react to stimuli you can't perceive. Her vivid hair, like greatest clothing, remain constant through these shadows. Oh yes, it's obvious, Calistage. His face is grim and clipped. Then he sees you looking at him. You're no ordinary mortal, we know that much. Start talking. His face is hard and set. And as you can see, we've already gotten a little bonus from having scanned butts as our ability. He's the changing god. Calistage is deliberately blind yourself, but why? So we're greeted right away by two unique characters. Both of them I want to tell you are potential companions, and so I just want you to keep that in mind because we have to choose between them. We can have both. So I think our first response is going to be, who are you? Why do I have to answer all the questions around here? If you don't remember who I am, you're more self-centered than I ever imagined. You know he's not the changing god, Algard. And she thinks to herself, Algard is being more paranoid than usual. How long must I put up with him? It's his face. I've never seen any other people reveal themselves like that. Only the changing god could have healed so quickly. He sighs and rubs his face, trying to regain his composure. Maybe you could help me for a change. You know what this means to me. You're familiar with the word changing, Algard. It implies inconstancy. Thus the changing god may well have changed. The full version is a first shrug, and she addresses you. You have to forgive him. He believes you're someone he once knew, even though it's painfully obvious to anyone that you are newly born. Her most solid self curtsies while others bow or spit. I and my sisters am Calistage. This is Algard. We are explorers, knowledge seekers. That's how we came to be in this room. If I'm not mistaken, you are what we call cast-off. The changing god created you, body and mind. Your sire used your body for a time, then abandoned it for reasons of his own. When his mind departed for a new experience, you were born in his cast-off shell. So you say I was born in the changing god left, but why am I not dead?
I used a cipher to slow your fall further, but the damage still would kill an ordinary person. But think about it. If you're the kind of person who can make your body into anything you want, what do? If you constructed bodies for centuries, you want to make each one better than the last. You want to live forever. You're not going to let your life end by accident. No, you'll make strong bodies, fast, powerful, maybe throw in regeneration while you're at it. The changing god has always been vain. He rarely stays long and shell doesn't suit his self-image. He looks you up and down, your smile suddenly under him. Perhaps the changing god fled because he didn't want to wear those scars of yours. So, regeneration is not just a plot point, it's also a game mechanic. When you die in the game system before you return to your memory palace, and I suppose the regeneration your character starts out with, regardless of the choices you make, is a reason for that. I want to, so, Alec, if you are the sort of person who wants to treat this as a role-playing endeavor, you want to get into the mind of your character, ask the question, who am I? How would I behave? You're welcome to do it. I will say that the game kind of pushes you for that, because it's, as I explained before, on the spectrum more towards simulation. If you make choices that you want to pay a paragon style character, you want to make a good choice, the game's not always going to reward you for that. If you encounter better and you give them a proper piece, you may not get a quest back. You may just lose the proper piece, so to speak. Or in this game, what do they call them? Shins. But if you are using roleplay, it's worth knowing that Alec seems to be the one who used a cipher to slow your fall further, as he says, but he does use the words further. Calistage also, I believe, used an Esotery to slow your fall. So you're sort of equally indebted to both. So we can ask about the changing god, and this question I want to ask, how can you be sure this body's a cast-off? Once again, you know, because Allegorn is suspicious of you, this may not be the right question to ask if you're worried about gaining his trust, but I'm more interested in the answer to that question. Calistage. You mean aside from your miraculous reformation, for one thing, there's your tattoo. All cast-offs have one, though its purpose is beyond me. And then, of course, there's your delicious naivete. You could be faking it. You don't live hundreds of years without learning to lie convincingly. However, she signs an aspiration and says to you, what do you think? Are you a newborn child? Are you a powerful mortal whom death has robbed of his memories? Allegorn crosses his arms and growls. Fine. What do you think? This should be interesting. So, it's crossed my mind as one of possible crackpot theories of the game. This may in fact very well be the changing god himself, not a cast-off, who has, for some reason, perhaps due to the circumstances of being a cocoon and falling to the earth, lost your memory. It would make for a very prototypical sort of endgame twist, but I think it's a little too obvious, particularly because the writers have drawn attention to the question itself. You have your amnesia, it's unlikely that the changing god would have handicapped himself in that way, again, any ability to avoid it. And secondly, you have the tattoo. So, I don't think we're the changing god. But, if we ask him, we could ask him, you obviously knew the changing god, what do you think? Am I him? This is a way of, A, dodging the answer to the question, and also B, perhaps getting a little bit of information about the changing god. So we're going to go with that. That is just the kind of question he would ask. He scrutinizes you in a way he hadn't before. You carry yourself with the same arrogance, that glint of knowing everything about our world and the worlds before it. Your personality, that's very much the same. Incidentally here, if you didn't know, the setting was called the Ninth World before. I believe it's supposed to be Earth, our Earth, but quite literally billions of years in the future, which gives it a nice sort of, gives it an excuse for blending both science fiction and fantasy elements. Definitely leans more towards fantasy, as I said before, but that dash of science fiction as a fan I find myself is very well in this game. And it also describes, it's not just sort of other science fiction stories, but very few have used it as a reason. I think a lot of it say, well, why don't you make it a totally fictional world, and then you wouldn't be bound by real life physics, by real life geology, by the things that we know about what's going to actually happen to the Earth and questions of that kind. Because when that far in the future is essentially an entirely new setting to begin with. One of the things is that the entire nature of the world is about the Numenera, this technology that's left over from past civilizations, would be from our future, that are so technologically advanced that they might as well be magic. We're going to talk a little bit more, probably a lot more about that later on. If you're not him, you're his goddamn spit image. He says this to emphasize the point. You'll have a lot to answer for from a lot of people. People like me. Calistage. And what are you basing that conclusion on, Allegorn? Your feelings. He looks away and composes just a little. Gods, you're so rancid sometimes, Calistage. Allegorn's not wrong. The changing god is quite selfish over the edges. Let's ask about the tides. It seems to be one core mechanics of the game. It's something we're going to encounter a lot. Do you know anything about the tides? Calistage. I've heard the term before. I studied your sire studied great depth. I'm afraid this is my field of inquiry. What was that blast of energy when I woke? As I was telling my colleague, it was obviously a physiological reaction of some kind. I've never witnessed the birth of the cast-off, but yes, it very well have been caused by urination consciousness. Don't worry, I don't believe it caused any real harm. To me, at least. Allegorn, really? When more pervasive than ever since we came here. You should take a sidelong look. You just can't empathize with other people unless she's experimenting on them. Yeah, that just isn't true. Well, once again, it's just empathy ourselves. Are you sure that the surge didn't hurt you? If it did, it was damage in our minds. How you check if it carved her, I couldn't say. That's fine, normal severe.